Okay, so today's topic is on the limited range feature, and give a bit of a backstory on where this has come out. Essentially, it's well, the way I like to interpret it, or the way I first tried to understand it, was it's similar to like an audio compressor or an overpressure valve. So it basically keeps the variables within a certain parameter for the recipe, and it will sort of help you control bars and pressure. And of course, we know that if we change anything in bars and pressure, it will also change the flow. So I guess this is just an introduction on what you will see when this feature is turned on, be that visually on the graph, i.e. what is represented in terms of flow and bar pressure when it is occurring, why it is useful, and also what you should be doing when you see certain scenarios. So we'll be running through some examples of over and under extraction, and quite possibly a extraction that doesn't have the feature on, so you know what to look for when it's not on as well. So Shin has very kindly joined us this week. So I'm very excited to pick his brain and see what he's got in store for us. I feel we've all got a lot to learn off Shin. Obviously, he's been on the DE1 platform for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now, Shin?
4 years, yeah.
4 years, wow. And personally myself, I've only been on the journey for 8 months, and I'm only really touching on the advanced stuff now. I only feel comfortable with the sort of basic profiles and understanding the features there. So I think this is a real good opportunity to see how you can transition from a basic profile to sort of learning more of the advanced steps and what we can achieve from there. So I'll let Shin take a few words in what he will be doing today. And yeah, so take it away, Shin.
Thank you. So today I'm gonna talk about the basic things about the flow and the pressure. So how we can control the flow and pressure, not in the profile way, but the like 40 matters. For example, the grounds, like ground dial, or like how much we put in the portafilter, the coffee beans, ground coffee beans, how much you put in the portafilter, that kind of thing, so that we can control the flow and the pressure by that way. And then how we can do with that. So if we try to like make the coffee like at the first time with the like unknown beans, we don't know how to adjust the ground, and then it can be like ruined because we have no idea like how the coffee will come out. So what I'm gonna explain is the limiter feature can like save the shot so that you don't have like really bad taste espresso. And then for that, I'm just gonna explain the very basic to what I'm just making. I'm working on a like new profile so that it's all like in together in this line.
Yeah,
we already know there is a limit to like 50 bars and 9 meters per second, but we can set better limiter. But I already explained that if we like try to slower the flow rate at the 6 bar, we have to like change the like pressure goal, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we change the flow like slower, the pressure goes the like lower. So we actually firstly do that for at the limiter. So if there is pressure limiter, and this is red as well, yeah, because we don't need any pressure limiter for the blue case, because pressure limiter is at like is for like don't go higher than that. So unless there is like no stoppage, then it doesn't go higher anyway. So for example, if we want to do for example, 2.3 meter per second profile, but the pressure goes at like, we don't want higher than 9 bar pressure, so it's the limit. In that case, even though we don't reach 2.3 meter per second, if the pressure tries to go higher than 8 bar, it controls the flow slower. Yeah. 2, not to go higher than 8 bar. Like this. Yeah. This is the same. We just need to change the path. That's it. And limit here. So let's reach 8 bar. 2.3 meter per second. 2.3 meter per second. All right. That's it. Yeah. So in that way, we basically don't ruin the shot. But actually, the pressure limit does something, but it makes the flow slower, so that the total extraction time goes longer. So that's, I'm not sure why. Yeah, we have the pressure for limiter, but we just need to control the dial or the pre-infusion time. Yeah, something like this. Is created by the Demian. He does beautiful things. So basically, we're gonna discuss about this too later. And then basically we can set 2 limits, flow limits or pressure limits, and pressure limits actually. So if anything reach first, that's gonna be the limit. So if we see here, I already explained that we can set the pressure limit when in the red case, when the particle is small and we put more dose and the pre-infusion fast, and then we can set the flow limit when in the blue case, when the particle is big and we put small dose and pre-infusion is slow. So the flow limit works in the blue case, pressure limit works in the red case. So if the particle, if the flow tries to go fast, it just stuck at 2 meters per second. The profile makes that, and then the pressure controls automatically. And if the pressure tries goes to higher than 8.5 bar in the case, then the limiter works and flow just changes automatically. And you can edit on here and here, here and here as well. And then another limiter is on here. Yeah, this is actually the limiter as well, the stop and wait. So if you set this goal, then the shot will stop automatically at 40 grams. The espresso is 40 grams, then the shot will be stopped at automatically. And you can set the volume goal as well. If the machine used for example 40 grams, 40 milliliters, then the shot will stop automatically. Like this. But you cannot control this step, infuse step actually. But there is another limit on here, the weight limit. So during the infuse step, if the coffee come out this much, or we use this much of water, then the infusion step automatically stops and then it moves to the pour step. Yeah. But we cannot control the pressure at the infusion step. So it's, for example, it does give the fastest pre-infusion at first, because we set the pressure goal at the pre-infusion. So descent, 1 second. Yeah, descent measure the pressure at the group head. So if there is no, like, if this space is not filled up, so there is no pressure because something should resist the water flow, then there can be pressure. But if there is nothing, then water can just fill up. So there is no pressure. So in the case, if we set the pressure goal, the machine tries to like reach the pressure by like giving the fastest flow. So in the case, the flow is at the fastest, but the pressure is actually there, but it just shows as 0 though. And then infuse step, it does 3-bar infuse. So this is why the we have to grind quite finer for this profile. So if the grind is not fine enough, it'll just extract at the infuse step because there is 3-bar. 3-bar is quite like okay bar to make coffee. Yeah. And then there's pour step. So if we like ground quite fine enough, then it'll go to the pour step, and then we can control the extraction by the limiters. Yeah. And then it'll stop here. And there is the temperature. You can set the temperature at infuse step and pour step as well. So we can see the examples of shots from the other users. So I'll show you some examples. Where is search? Give me a second. There you go. I find the flow limiter working profile by the extraction time. So if the extraction time is short, that means the flow limiter worked. And if the extraction time is long, that means the pressure like limiter is on. So if you see there is 23.5 seconds, it's quite slow. It's quite fast. If you see in here. It's too fast actually. I actually told you that if we don't grind finer, then it'll just make coffee. Yeah, at the 3-bar step. But actually 4 grams limiter worked in the case. So it hit 4 grams, it just moved to the next step. Yeah. And the flow limit, he said the flow at 2.4 actually. Yeah, so the extraction is fast. And it seems like from here to here, from here to maybe here, the pressure limiter kind of worked.
Yeah.
And he seemed like set the pressure limiter at 6.5 or something. Yeah, but this is not a good example, sorry. This one here is good one. Yeah. So in that case, we can clearly see the pressure limiter worked because the flow rate didn't reach the goal flow rate, but the pressure like limiter, he said it at like 8.5 though, it went up to 8.7 to 9. Yeah. So he ground fine enough, so it didn't make it like that much of coffee, and it had like quite acceptable infusion time, like about 10 seconds. And then yeah, the pressure limiter was on, but the flow limiter was off. Yeah. But actually told you about the profile, but this profile actually set the flow rate goal and then set the pressure as the limiter. Yeah, so it's actually not the flow limiter and the pressure limiter are working together, but it's just pressure limiter at the flow rate.
Yes.
Like profile.
And I guess you can see that from the actual wiggliness of the pressure.
Right.
So I think that's also a good signal. Then confirmed by the lower flow rate than expected. Yeah, that's quite clear. That's definitely clear. And if we compare to the last graph you had, where they were, it was the opposite, and they were under extracting. Well, maybe under extracting. Yeah, the grind was too coarse. We can kind of see the opposite, right?
Right.
To a certain extent. The pressure is not as wiggly, it's a little bit more smoother. But we can see the flow rate, the gram in cup was immediately quite high straight after the ramp.
Right.
So these, I guess, are the clues that you were looking for when the feature kicks in, and I guess, for example, this graph, we would obviously grind finer, as Shin has suggested, and hopefully elongate the infusion time to perhaps get that 4 grams to drip a bit slower.
Right.
So yeah, so even though the parameters weren't hit, this shot would still be okay. But I guess we could say it's in the ballpark. The limiter feature worked and got a decent cut that you wouldn't put in the sink essentially, and gives you data to fine tune from there. So yeah, that's great to see those graphs. And what is apparent to me is that the limits that are set are very intentional. So you were mentioning about the grams in cup during infusion, and also the pressure exits. These are, I guess, if you're reviewing your graphs, you would look back into your recipe or preset and see, okay, why did it come out at that? Okay, it came out at 3 bars and then sharply inclined. So you would then go back into your recipe to double confirm. And I think that's what a lot of us had done as we've learned on the DE1 throughout our journey. You know, we're perhaps asked on the forum for initial input, and then they may ask, oh, what was it in your, did you change anything in your profile? And then you discover yourself that way. So yeah, this is great stuff, Shin, and I think it's great to sort of see you also explaining it on the graph as well as the theory behind. The theory behind was very interesting in especially with the latest point you put out in the blooming step. And I personally, I'd never really thought about solving that problem with a blooming step. And I guess, and I did actually read your profile that you put out, and I guess that's kind of what you're alluding to, and you can use that blooming sort of style to help you in those situations.
I was like working on the new profile. I may call it I got your back.
I like
it won't like fail for the any case, because there are a lot of like profiles that user made for the blue case, fast flow, so that they can just control the flow to slower so that the shot won't be ruined. But for this one, I only can see the blooming and some Damien's works, the LV something. Yeah. But what if we can control both at the same time? If we can put the blooming in the shot and then non-blooming in the same profile, then it'll be really great. So I put the 2.2 milliliter per second flow shot with blooming. It's something weird, but we have limiter features so we can make it. So this is the advanced like step profiling page. So pre-infusion is the same, is quite like classic 4 meter per second, and all like if the pressure is higher than 4.0 bar, then it'll move like to the next step. Then next step is like low resistance. If the resistance is like low, the blue, then it'll just do the flow shot, 2.2 meter per second. But if the resistance is high, that means the flow rate goes like lower. So if the flow rate is like under 1.5 meter per second, then it moves to the next step. It doesn't do 2.2 meter per second shot, but it just moves to the next step. Next step is pulse, something like blooming. So it'll just pulse. And then if the pressure is under 3.0 bar, it'll move to the next step. But I'm thinking of removing the time, or like longer time, something like 1 minute, because I tried with like extremely fine setting, and the pressure goes like up to 15 bar. And then if I set 30 seconds, it'll like move to the next step at 30 seconds. But at this point, it cannot make 2.2 meters per second. So I have like more time to infuse to make the like more water path. So I'm just gonna higher the time and then make this pressure this pressure as the trigger. Yeah. And then there's ramp. It's the same like the blooming. It'll smoothly ramp up the flow to up to like 2.2, and then it'll do the shot with 2.2. Yeah. And then there is pressure limit 8.6. Yeah. This working quite okay. But I actually made another like limit for the move on if. I just want to set the flow and the pressure together. Yeah, pressure, for example, because it takes longer to like be made. Because 1 second, I think I can show you. There you go. This is the shot that I made today with the profile. So there is like there was pre-infusion, and then as you can see, the pressure went up to 15 bar, the limit. And during this stage, the checking like kind of is called like low resistance, but it's kind of like checking the flow. If the flow can make like 2.2, it just keeps, but the flow is like goes lower than 1.5, it moves to the blooming. But this is kind of too long. It went like for 4 seconds on this step. But if I can set the pressure like limit at here, for example, like 8 bar, then it would like move to the next stage at 12 seconds. So it'll took 2 seconds. So that if we can set the pressure and the flow as the trigger, that would be like nicer for like making this sorry for firework. Yeah. So the blooming was there because I ground too fine. Yeah. So that it went up to like 15 bar, and then if there was no blooming, then it would just like go this, and then the flow goes like struggling in there. But the pressure trigger worked to move to the next step at the blooming stage, so that there was ramp, but the ground was too fine, still too fine, so that it cannot reach the flow rate that I wanted, the 2.2, but there was like pressure limiter, so it didn't like squeeze a lot during the like extraction stage. Yeah, it can't work like this. And if I, yeah, there you go. Oh, it's too fast. Yeah, this is kind of like ruined shot, but anyway, if I set the ground like it's too coarse, but if I can set the ground like coarse enough, there won't be the blooming stage, but it'll just keep making coffee with like 2.2 meter per second. Cool. Yeah, so it can work.
So it becomes a flow based then instead of
based. Yeah.
I see. So
it can make the coffee like great coffee with like fine setting or like coarse setting. Yeah, but
I'm interested in when you're setting, let's say you're setting limits on your pressure. And I've had instances where I've played around with the limiter a little bit, and I just wanted to see what it did. And sometimes when you set the pressure to, let's say you wanted to stop it at 9 bar, and you've set your grind to fine, but then when you pulling the shot, it obviously exceeds over maybe 10 to 13 bar, and obviously the pressure bar is very linear, a very straight line afterwards. And then you're thinking, okay, I set it to 9, but it only stopped about 10, maybe 11, maybe 13, 13. What is the reason why if you set it at 9, it doesn't actually stop at 9, but rather usually it will go overshoot a little bit? Is there anything we can do with the flow limiter to stop it overshooting so much? Or is it something to do with your own range that you want to put in? Do you get what I mean?
You mean the pressure limiter or the flow limiter?
Pressure limiter. So,
so you set the flow goal and the pressure, make the pressure limiter working, right?
yes.
So you set the pressure limiter at 9 bar, but the pressure eventually went up to like 10 bar, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's actually up to Ray. There's nothing we can do because we already told the machine to not go above 9 bar, but the machine went above 9 bar.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's up to Ray.
Okay.
That's kind of like formula thing, I think.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm alluding to is how would we get that value to be more within our range? So I suppose what we're alluding to is we would, instead of putting 9 bar, just doing a simple benchmark, if it went over 1 to 1.5, we would set it back down to 8 bar, for example, to keep it within that range. So I guess this is part in what you're saying is a programming thing that the app is calculating, and perhaps is a slight delay, or maybe it's difficult to be that accurate. I mean, it's quite foreseeable for us to presume that if we do change the pressure, a little bit of change will be a very big change for the extraction. So it could be quite possible that it's a very difficult thing to program in, and this is the range that we're working with. But I don't really see it as a big problem. You know, we do it with calibrating ourselves with our recipes. So we would just put it down to 8 bar, and hopefully it won't go beyond 9.5, for example, from what we discussed. And
if I go like kind of deeper on that, so
cool.
That should be like how our temperature works. So Ray programs the temperature to work according to the flow rate. So if the flow rate is fast, the temperature doesn't try to heat up too much. So it controls the cold pump and hot pump to keep the temperature cool as much as you can. But when the temperature the flow rate is quite low, the temperature tries to build up more than when the flow rate is fast, because it'll, like, for example, when the temperature is quite low, it'll try to heat up more. So that when there is like quite fast enough flow rate, if we heat up the water at the maximum and then send the fast flow rate with the hot water, then the temperature will eventually go even higher than the goal. But when so that we have to control the cold pump to make the water not too hot. So if we put that kind of thing into the limiter thing, then we can work it better. Because if we, as your example, even though we set the pressure limiter at 9 bar, if the pressure goes up to 10 bar, that means the pressure limiter should be triggered earlier than that. So that if we can set the pressure limiter according to the current condition of the shot, then we can work it out actually. So that means it's up to Ray.
I mean, just been leading up to the Zoom, I have been playing around with it a bit more, and I found that just that simple recalibration of tried it and it overshot by so much. You just take off how much it's overshot by, and in general it will move you back into where you want to be for that profile. And since having it on now on these profiles and pulling shots day to day, I'm finding where it's most useful now for me is if the bean is suddenly aging and it's changing its characteristics i.e. changing its grind from day to day, I'm finding that I can see this physical change of the beans simply because the limiter feature is coming on. It's really fascinating to me because I've spent a lot of my time trying to standardize my puck prep to make sure everything is as consistent as it can be, and to all of a sudden realize that the machine is picking up on things that I may have not ever picked up upon on a analog machine, I think is really improving my consistency from day to day on one batch. Where I found it not so useful is when I'm changing batch to batches and it comes in and it's that information to me is not as useful to me. But where it is useful is when you're learning about how your puck prep or how your recipe is affecting your extractions. And I think it's a very good tool to learn when your shots are under and over extracting. One of the things that I pick up on without looking at the graph, because I'm normally pulling maybe 3 to 4 shots in one go. So I might have a shot running and then preparing my next shot. And I'm very attuned to the sound of the pumps. So, when you have a fast flow rate of 8 milliliters per second as opposed to 4.5, the pre-infusion noise is a lot different. And you can, with repetition, you will find that you will notice that the sound of your pumps will change when the limiter feature kicks in. And it kicks in more the more extreme your error is, or your variable, i.e. you ground too coarse or you ground too high. And it's that very characteristic noise. And when you're familiar with that noise, you know exactly what is going on, and you can confirm with the graph. But where I've experienced a lot of people coming back to me, especially with the emails and user problems, is my machine's making this weird noise. I don't know what's going on. My flow is going crazy. I think there's something wrong with my machine. And I think it's a very valid point for them to think, there's something going wrong because maybe the machine's updated and it's put it on there and the machine's not acting as it should, as expected. So
that's like just right before explosion.
Yeah. And I mean, it's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you, Shin, where a new feature is already updated, and you're wondering, is it something I've done? Is it the machine, or is it So I think getting familiar with this feature is definitely one way of using it more. I think I was very shy on using it and having the belief that my technique and I can manipulate the grind to not use this feature. But when moving on to, let's say, faster profile shots like the Rao Allonge, I found that it is more efficient for me to use this pressure limiter feature because I will waste less beans. And I wouldn't say it's more of the quality is obviously more consistent and is better, but in terms for me, I'm seeing it more efficient because I can see the data, I can see the reaction, and because we know what the limiter is doing, we can change with even more confidence with our recipe or our grind setting. And the more you use it, the more you notice the little dips in the flow rate, or maybe the increase in the flow rates that are very subtle. And these points are most notable during the rise and hold phase. So let's take the example of if your grind is too coarse. If your grind is too coarse, what will the limiter try to do? As Shen has explained, if the flow is too fast, it's basically the DE1 app is trying to increase the flow to build more pressure. That is the key point here. The flow rate going into the group head, added with the resistance of the coffee puck, is what makes the pressure. So that is the one means in which the flow limiter will execute when it detects low pressure, especially during the rise and hold phase. And the opposite is true for when your grind is too fine. It will try to reduce the flow rate to not cause the pressure to rise so much, or to rise above the point at which the limiter is set. And when it is more subtle, instead of a smooth gradient going down from the ramp up in terms of the flow rate, you will see either a dip in the curve, or either a rise. And depending on how extreme the variable is, will depend on how much that dip or rise will be. And it can be quite subtle, can't it, Shin? Especially if you're already quite tuned into your grinder. It can be really subtle. But if you're really familiar with a blend and you've really fine-tuned it, you will notice these differences that the limiter will kick in. Most notably when it's gone a bit too fine. It won't be as smooth, and the aftertaste will be a bit more sort of rough on the palate. But when you get it right, and if the limiter feature has not had too great of an effect on the extraction, i.e. the pressure and the flow, then more often than not, that shot is very drinkable. And that's where the flow limiter excels, in my opinion. It's when you're in the ballpark, and it gives you that extra means to really fine tune from there. And what Shin has enlightened me on is I guess in the pre-infusion part, in terms of if your grind size particles are too small, or if your dose is too much, and there's too great of a resistance. But going back onto the blooming bit, Shin, I've learned a little bit from you today in the way you're setting your move on ifs and your flow in relation to pressure. I think that's what really confused me a little bit in the start, in trying to understand how the flow and pressure in terms of the limit feature was working. It's from our discussions today, it really sounds more like it's kind of like a move on if, but it's in relation to the extraction. So as you've identified, you can't lower the flow rate without affecting the pressure. So it favors which one is more important according to that scenario, depending if it's under extraction. Therefore, would try to increase the pressure by other flow. And the opposite would say for the other. So yeah, that's really been eye-opening for me, how the flow relates to the pressure, but also how this limiter feature essentially reduces your need to program further steps. Okay, all right. So I think we're coming up to the end now, Shin. We've had some really good discussions here, I think. A little bit off piece, but I think really interesting to say the least. I've learned something new, that's for sure. Hopefully everyone who is watching this or will rewatch this will also learn something new. And from the very least, give it a go. And if you're feeling confident, change something or turn it off if you're feeling really confident after a while, and see how you go. We're always here at Decent, so if you're having trouble, just grab me or Shane or email through or any of the social media, and we'll get back to you. All right. So took a little bit of a siesta of the Zooms last week, had a bit of technical problems, and the week before I was just a bit inundated. So we should be coming back on next week. I don't know, Shin, if you want to get involved again next week. I don't know what your time is like, but I'll contact you later on. But yeah, I think we'll close it there. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much, Shin.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you all.
See ya. Bye bye.
Bye.